The deep space scanner made a soft beeping sound that caught Commander Jiwan's attention on the bridge of the Coalition survey ship Eternal Dawn. She looked at the green display screen and saw something that made her pause for a moment. The energy readings from the third planet in this yellow star system were not what she expected to see from a primitive world. Admiral Kethvar walked over to her station with his long reptilian legs making clicking sounds on the metal floor. His red eyes looked at the data with the confidence of someone who had conquered 47 worlds in his long career. The scales on his face showed his age and experience in galactic warfare. "What do we have here, Commander?" he asked in his deep voice that always made junior officers nervous. Jiwan pointed to the energy signatures on her screen. "The third planet shows unusual readings, sir. There are organized electromagnetic patterns coming from multiple locations on the surface. The energy output suggests they have achieved basic space travel capabilities." The Admiral made a sound that was close to laughter in his species. "Another primitive world that thinks it can challenge the might of the Coalition. How many ships do they have floating around their little planet? Our long-range sensors detect approximately 50 vessels in orbit and nearby space, sir. They appear to be using fusion-based propulsion systems with some form of artificial gravity generation." Admiral Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. The Galactic Coalition had been expanding across this region of space for over 3,000 years. Every species they encountered followed the same pattern. First, they would be offered the chance to join as tributary members. If they refused, then the Coalition fleet would demonstrate why resistance was pointless. After that, the survivors would usually beg to become part of the great galactic civilization. Set course for the third planet. We will make first contact and explain to these humans how the galaxy really works. The Eternal Dawn moved through space toward the blue and green world that the natives called Earth. As they got closer, Jiwan's instruments picked up more details about the human civilization below. Cities covered large parts of the continents, and orbital stations surrounded the planet like a metal ring. The technology level was higher than most species achieved before joining the Coalition, but it was still nothing compared to what the great powers possessed. A communications signal reached their ship as they entered the outer edge of the planetary system. The message was in a simple mathematical format that showed the humans understood basic principles of interstellar contact. Admiral Kethvar allowed Jiwan to respond with standard Coalition first contact protocols. The human response came quickly. They transmitted a location where the Coalition ship should go for a meeting. The coordinates led to a space station orbiting their moon, which showed impressive construction for such a young species. The station was large enough to dock several Coalition vessels and had weapon systems that looked more advanced than expected. When the Eternal Dawn connected with the human station, Admiral Kethvar prepared for the meeting that would decide Earth's future. He wore his full ceremonial armor, which displayed the symbols of all the worlds he had brought into Coalition control. Commander Jiwan accompanied him along with a full honor guard to make sure the humans understood they were dealing with superior beings. The human delegation was waiting for them in a conference room that had clear walls showing the blue planet below. Their leader introduced himself as Captain Minho of the United Earth Space Command. He was smaller than most Coalition species, but carried himself with confidence that surprised the Admiral. The other humans in the room watched everything with careful eyes that missed nothing. Captain Minho spoke first. "Welcome to our system, Admiral Kethvar. We received your initial transmission and understand you represent a large galactic government. We are honored by your visit and hope this can be the beginning of peaceful relations between our peoples." The Admiral felt pleased by this respectful greeting. Most primitive species were either too afraid to speak or foolishly hostile when first meeting Coalition representatives. These humans seemed to understand their place in the galactic order without needing harsh lessons. "Captain Minho, your species has reached an important moment in its development. You have achieved basic space flight and energy manipulation, which shows promise for future growth. The Galactic Coalition offers Earth membership as a tributary world under our protection and guidance." The human captain listened carefully, then asked questions about what tributary status would mean for Earth. Admiral Keth Var explained how human resources would help support Coalition expansion, while human military forces would serve under Coalition command. In return, Earth would receive advanced technology and protection from hostile species. Captain Minho discussed the offer with his fellow humans in their own language for several minutes. When he turned back to face the Coalition delegation, his expression had become more serious. "Admiral, we appreciate your offer, but Earth must decline tributary status. We prefer to remain independent while building friendly relationships with other species. Perhaps we could establish trade agreements or mutual defense partnerships instead." The conference room became very quiet. Admiral Kethvar felt his body temperature rise as anger began to replace his earlier satisfaction. In 3,000 years of Coalition expansion, no primitive species had ever refused their generous offer of membership. Commander Jiwon saw the warning signs in her superiors' body language and tried to keep the situation calm. "Captain Minho, perhaps you need more time to consider the benefits of joining our great civilization. Many species initially have concerns about giving up their independence." Captain Minho shook his head slowly. "We have given your offer serious consideration, Commander. Earth values its freedom and the right to choose our own path among the stars. We hope the Coalition can respect our decision and work with us as equals rather than subjects." Admiral Kethvar stood up from his chair with enough force to make the metal frame creak under his weight. His red eyes glowed brighter as his anger became harder to control. The humans remained seated and showed no signs of fear despite facing a predator species that had evolved on a high-gravity death world. "Captain Minho, you clearly do not understand how the galaxy works. Species that refuse Coalition membership face the consequences of their foolish pride. The 47th Subjugation Fleet consists of 200 vessels that have never known defeat in battle. If Earth will not join us willingly, then you will learn to obey through force." The human captain's expression did not change, but something shifted in the atmosphere of the room. The other humans sat up straighter and their hands moved closer to their weapons in movements so subtle that only a trained warrior would notice them. "Admiral, we hope it will not come to violence between our peoples. However, Earth will defend itself if attacked. Our ships and crews are prepared for any threat to our world and our freedom." Admiral Kethvar made the Coalition gesture for ending negotiations and walked toward the exit. "You have made your choice, Captain. In 7 standard days, my fleet will arrive to demonstrate why resistance to Coalition rule is pointless. I suggest you use that time to reconsider your position while you still have a chance." The Coalition delegation returned to their ship and prepared to leave the human system. As the eternal dawn moved away from Earth, Commander Jiwon monitored human communications and ship movements. The activity level increased dramatically after their meeting ended. Human vessels began moving to new positions throughout their system, while ground-based facilities showed signs of military preparation. "Sir, the humans appear to be mobilizing their defenses. Should we remain to observe their preparations, Admiral?" Kethavar was already planning the deployment of his subjugation fleet. "No, Commander. Let them prepare all they want. When 200 Coalition warships arrive, they will quickly learn that primitive weapons cannot stand against the might of our empire. Return to fleet headquarters and begin mobilization immediately." The Eternal Dawn jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of another species that would soon learn the price of defying Coalition authority. Behind them, Earth's 50 ships moved into defensive positions around their home world, while deep space monitoring stations tracked the departure of their unwelcome visitors. On the surface of Earth, Fleet Admiral Sumin received reports from Captain Minho about the failed negotiations. The Terran Defense Council had been preparing for this moment since first detecting Coalition scout ships months ago. Now the time for hiding was over, and humanity would show the galaxy what they were truly capable of when threatened. The war that would reshape galactic civilization was about to begin. 7 days later, the Coalition 47th Subjugation Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a swarm of angry metal insects. 200 warships arranged themselves in perfect battle formation, with Admiral Kethvar's flagship, Crimson Dominion, at the center of the massive armada. The ships varied in size from fast attack cruisers to massive dreadnought-class vessels that could crack planets with their main guns. Commander Jiwan stood at her sensor station watching the tactical display show the human defensive positions. Earth's 50 ships looked pitifully small compared to the overwhelming force that had just arrived. The human vessels were spread across their system in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to protect multiple locations at once. Admiral, the human fleet is maintaining position near their homeworld. They show no signs of retreat or surrender, she reported while studying the energy signatures coming from the enemy ships. Admiral Kethvar examined the battle display with satisfaction. The humans had chosen to make their final stand here, rather than fleeing to deep space where they might survive a few more days. Their formation looked professional, but no amount of courage could overcome such impossible odds. Open a communication. Channel to the human fleet. Let them hear their final warning before we begin the destruction of their civilization. The main screen showed Captain Hyunwoo standing on the bridge of the human flagship UES Defiant. The human commander looked calm, despite facing certain death. His crew moved efficiently around him while displays showed the incoming threat in all its terrible glory. Behind him, other officers worked at their stations with the focused intensity of warriors preparing for battle. Admiral Kethvar spoke in his most intimidating voice. Human Commander, you are facing the 47th Subjugation Fleet of the Galactic Coalition. Your resistance ends now. Surrender immediately, and your world will be spared total destruction. Continue to fight, and we will turn your planet into a lifeless rock as an example to other primitive species. Captain Hyunwoo looked directly into the camera with eyes that showed no fear. Admiral Kethvar, you came to our home uninvited. You threatened our world and our freedom. Now you will learn what happens to those who attack humanity. He paused for a moment, then added words that would be remembered across the galaxy. You came to our home. You chose this. The transmission ended, and Admiral Kethvar gave the order to begin the attack. The Coalition fleet moved forward in a wall of destruction that had conquered dozens of worlds. Their weapons powered up and targeting systems locked onto the human. Ships that dared to stand against them. The human response was immediate and devastating. The UES Defiant fired first with a weapon that made space itself seem to bend around the projectile. The railgun round moved at incredible speed and struck a Coalition cruiser dead center. The enemy ship's shields flashed once, then failed completely as the kinetic projectile tore through armor plating like it was made of paper. More human ships opened fire, and the space between the two fleets became filled with streaks of light and metal. The Coalition vessels returned fire with energy weapons that could vaporize smaller ships in seconds. Explosions bloomed in the darkness as both sides took hits in the opening moments of battle. Commander Jiwan watched her displays in growing shock as the tactical situation developed. The human ships were moving at speeds that should have torn their hulls apart under the stress. Their weapons hit with accuracy that defied probability, while their defensive systems created walls of intercepting fire that destroyed incoming missiles before they could reach their targets. Sir, the enemy vessels are displaying impossible performance. Characteristics. Their acceleration rates exceed our theoretical calculations by over 200%. Admiral Kethvar ignored her report as he focused on the battle developing around them. 3 Coalition ships had already been destroyed, while the human fleet remained intact. This was not how subjugation campaigns were supposed to proceed against primitive species. Captain Hyunwoo's voice came over the communication system again. All human ships execute Battle Plan Omega. Show them what Earth's children can do when their home is threatened. The human fleet suddenly changed formation with coordination that seemed impossible without direct neural linking. Ships that had been spread across the system converged on the Coalition force from multiple angles while maintaining perfect spacing and timing. Their movements looked like a deadly dance choreographed by a master tactician. The UES Defiant led the charge directly at Admiral Kethvar's flagship, while other human vessels engaged the coalition formation from the sides and rear. Captain Hyunwoo's ship fired continuously as it closed distance with the enemy command vessel. Each shot found its target, and each hit caused massive damage to coalition ships. Captain Minho commanded one of the human attack squadrons and demonstrated why Earth had chosen him for first contact duties. His ship, the UES Resolute, moved through the coalition formation like a shark among smaller fish. Enemy vessels turned to engage him, but found their targeting systems unable to track his rapid course changes and sudden acceleration bursts. The coalition fleet tried to use their numbers advantage by surrounding individual human ships and overwhelming them with concentrated fire. This tactic had worked against every previous enemy, but the humans seemed to anticipate every move before it happened. Their point defense systems destroyed incoming weapons, while their own guns continued to find targets with deadly accuracy. Commander G1's sensor readings showed impossible results. Admiral, the human weapons are generating energy outputs that exceed our maximum theoretical limits. Their ships are also using some form of predictive targeting system that allows them to hit our vessels even during evasive maneuvers. Admiral Kethavar watched another coalition cruiser explode under human fire while his own ship shook from multiple hits. The battle that should have lasted minutes was stretching into hours, while his fleet suffered losses that mounted with each passing moment. The human ships worked together like parts of a single organism. When one vessel came under heavy attack, others would instantly move to support it with covering fire and electronic warfare. Their coordination was so perfect that the coalition fleet found itself fighting not 50 individual ships, but one unified force that seemed to read their minds. Captain Hyunwoo brought the UES Defiant alongside Admiral Kethvar's flagship and opened fire at point-blank range. The human ship's weapons carved deep wounds in the coalition vessel's armor, while return fire seemed to have no effect on the enemy's defensive systems. The Crimson Dominion shook under the assault as critical systems began to fail throughout the ship. Other human commanders showed the same tactical brilliance as their leader. Captain Dongwoo led a squadron of smaller ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts in space. His vessels would strike coalition formations from unexpected angles, then vanish before the enemy could respond. Coalition ships found themselves firing at empty space, while human weapons struck them from directions their sensors claimed were clear. The space around Earth became a graveyard of coalition vessels as the battle continued. Ships that had conquered worlds across the galaxy found themselves outmatched by human technology and tactics they could not understand. Every advantage the coalition had relied upon for centuries proved useless against this new enemy. Captain Yuna commanded the human heavy weapons platform UES Thunder and demonstrated the true power of Earth's military technology. Her ship's main gun-fired projectiles that moved so fast they created visible distortions in space itself. Each shot destroyed a coalition vessel completely, while the Thunder's defensive systems made it nearly impossible for enemy weapons to find their target. Admiral Kethvar realized his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that should have been helpless against coalition might. The human ships showed no signs of damage despite hours of concentrated fire, while his own forces continued to suffer catastrophic losses. All ships retreat to hyperspace immediately. We cannot win this engagement. The surviving coalition vessels tried to disengage from the battle but found the human fleet pursuing them with relentless efficiency. Ships that attempted to flee discovered their hyperspace drives had been damaged by precise human fire that targeted critical systems. Others found their escape routes blocked by human vessels that seemed to know exactly where they would try to run. Captain Hyunwoo's voice filled the communication channels one final time. Any coalition ship that attempts to leave this system will be destroyed. Surrender now, or share the fate of your companions. Only 12 coalition ships remained from the original force of 200. Admiral Kethavar's flagship was barely functional, and his crew was in shock from witnessing the impossible defeat of their invincible fleet. The human ships surrounded the survivors with weapons ready to finish what they had started. Commander. Jiwan looked at the tactical display showing the complete destruction of Coalition forces. Sir, we have no choice. If we do not surrender, they will destroy us all. Admiral Kethvar stared at the human ships that had accomplished the impossible. His pride as a Coalition officer warred with his responsibility to the crews under his command. Finally, he gave the order that no Coalition admiral had ever spoken during a subjugation campaign. The news traveled across Coalition space faster than the surviving ships that carried it. In the capital system of Vorthak Prime, High Counselor Thexmore received the impossible report with disbelief that slowly turned to rage. The 47th subjugation. Fleet had been completely destroyed by a primitive species that possessed only 50 warships. Commander Nara stood before the Council of 12 with data recordings from the battle that showed human ships performing beyond all known physical limits. The energy readings and tactical maneuvers seemed impossible according to every scientific principle the Coalition understood. Yet the evidence was undeniable, and the destruction of Admiral Kethvar's fleet was complete. Honorable Counselors. The humans displayed weapon systems and defensive capabilities that exceed our current technology by significant margins. Their coordination and tactical planning suggests a military organization far more advanced than our initial assessment. Indicated, High Counselor Thexmore examined the battle recordings with growing alarm. His species had built the Coalition through superior military technology and strategic planning. If humanity possessed weapons that could defeat their finest fleets, then the foundation of galactic order itself was under threat. Commander Nara, what is your assessment of human military capabilities based on this engagement? The intelligence officer hesitated before answering. Her analysis had produced results that challenged everything the Coalition believed about galactic power structures. Sir, based on observed performance characteristics, I estimate that each human warship is equivalent to approximately 4 standard Coalition vessels in combat effectiveness. The council chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives from 12 species debated the implications of this report. Some demanded immediate retaliation, while others suggested negotiation might be preferable to risking further military disasters. The unity that had held the Coalition together for millennia began to show cracks under the pressure of this unprecedented defeat. High Counselor Thexmore raised his scaled hand for silence. The humans have demonstrated they pose an existential threat to Coalition authority. If word of this defeat spreads unchecked, it will inspire rebellion among our tributary worlds. We must respond with overwhelming force to restore respect for Coalition power. Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's victory spread through channels that the Coalition could not control. Enslaved species whispered about the beings who had made the mighty Vorthak flee in terror, resistance groups that had been crushed. For generations began to hope that freedom might be possible after all. On the aquatic world of Nephti Prime, the ruling council met in emergency session to discuss their relationship with the Coalition. For 800 years, they had provided ships and resources to maintain Coalition expansion, while their own people suffered under harsh tribute demands. The news from Sol's system changed everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. Premier. Hydros addressed his fellow leaders with words that would have been treason just days before. The Coalition fleet was destroyed by a species they claimed was primitive and weak. If the humans can defeat 200 Coalition warships, then perhaps other species can find the courage to resist as well. Similar conversations took place on worlds throughout Coalition space as the impossible news reached every corner of the galaxy. Species that had accepted Coalition rule as inevitable began to question whether submission was truly necessary. The myth of Coalition invincibility, that had maintained order for 3,000 years, crumbled as fast as the 47th Subjugation Fleet. Back on Earth, Fleet Admiral Suman convened the Terran Defense Council in preparation for the massive retaliation that would surely follow their victory. Intelligence reports from deep space monitoring stations indicated coalition forces were mobilizing throughout their territory. The human attack had succeeded beyond all expectations, but it had also guaranteed that much larger battles lay ahead. Captain Minho returned from his patrol missions with disturbing news about coalition ship movements near the border of human space. Admiral, our reconnaissance drones have detected massive fleet concentrations building at 3 separate staging areas. The coalition is preparing something much larger than their first attack. Admiral Suman studied the intelligence reports with the calm focus that had made her Earth's supreme military commander. She had spent decades preparing for this moment while hiding humanity's true capabilities from potential enemies. Now the secret was out and the galaxy would learn what humans could accomplish when their survival was threatened. Captain, the Coalition will respond to their defeat with everything they have available. Our victory over the 47th Fleet was just the opening battle in a war that will determine the future of galactic civilization. The Admiral activated secure communication channels that connected her to hidden military installations throughout the Sol system and beyond. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for interstellar warfare while carefully concealing their true strength from alien observers. The time for deception had ended. Deep in the asteroid belt, Captain Seok-jin received activation orders for the second battle fleet that had been waiting in concealment for decades. His ships began powering up weapons systems and conducting final preparation checks while maintaining strict communication silence. Similar orders reached 9 other fleet commanders positioned throughout human space. Captain Tae-hyun commanded the electronic warfare fleet hidden in the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon. His ships carried experimental technology that could blind entire enemy formations while disrupting their communication and targeting systems. The humans had learned from studying captured coalition equipment and had developed countermeasures that would shock their enemies. On Mars, Captain Yuna supervised the final construction phases of the heavy bombardment fleet that would serve as humanity's primary offensive weapon against enemy strongholds. Each of her ships carried weapons powerful enough to crack planetary crusts, while their armor could withstand direct hits from coalition capital ship guns. The activation of human military forces proceeded with clockwork precision as commanders who had trained together for decades put their plans into motion. Captain Ji-hoon's carrier fleet launched thousands of automated fighters that would swarm enemy formations like angry insects. Captain Ming-yu's fast attack squadron prepared for deep strike missions against coalition supply lines and communication centers. Meanwhile, Commander Nara had been given a desperate assignment by the Coalition High Command. She was to infiltrate human space using captured communication codes and determine the true extent of Earth's military capabilities. The survival of the Coalition might depend on understanding how many ships the humans could actually field in battle. Her stealth ship approached the outer edge of Sol system while broadcasting false identification codes taken from wreckage of the destroyed human vessels. The infiltration succeeded, and she found herself able to monitor human military communications without being detected by their security systems. What she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about galactic warfare. The humans were not celebrating their victory over the 47th Fleet because they considered it a minor engagement against a small enemy force. Their communications spoke of 11 separate battle fleets with thousands of ships preparing for full-scale galactic war. Commander Nara's instruments detected massive energy signatures throughout the Sol system as installations that had appeared to be civilian facilities revealed their true military nature. Shipyards hidden in asteroid fields were producing warships at rates that exceeded anything the Coalition had ever achieved. The humans had been preparing for interstellar conquest for generations while carefully hiding their true intentions. Her worst fears were confirmed when she intercepted communications between human fleet commanders discussing something called Protocol 7. The message fragment spoke of full deployment and total war against Coalition forces throughout known space. The humans were not content with defending their home system. They planned to carry the battle to every Coalition stronghold in the galaxy, Captain Dongwu's reconnaissance ships detected the Coalition spy vessel before it could escape Sol's system with its intelligence. The human stealth fleet had been tracking the intruder since it first entered their space, while allowing it to gather information that would serve their strategic purposes. Admiral, we have confirmed that Coalition intelligence is aware of our true military capabilities. The enemy spy has observed enough of our preparations to understand they are facing a threat much larger than they initially believed. Fleet Admiral Suman smiled at this news. The psychological warfare phase of their campaign was proceeding exactly as planned. Soon, the Coalition would learn that humanity possessed not one fleet that could defeat their forces, but 11 fleets, each more powerful than anything they had encountered. High Counselor, Thexmore received Commander Nara's emergency transmission with shock that turned to terror as the full implications became clear. The humans possessed military forces that dwarfed anything the Coalition could field. Their technology was decades ahead of Coalition standards, and their strategic planning showed preparation for galactic conquest that spanned generations. Mobilize the Grand Armada immediately. The Coalition Grand Armada emerged from hyperspace in the Sol system like an avalanche of metal and death. Over 2,000 warships from 12 different species arranged themselves in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. At the center, Admiral Kethvar commanded from his new flagship Galactic Dominion, while nursing the scars humanity had given him during their first encounter. The massive fleet represented every military asset the Coalition could gather, without leaving their core worlds completely defenseless. Dreadnoughts that could shatter moons floated alongside carrier vessels packed with thousands of fighter craft. Heavy cruisers bristled with weapons capable of sterilizing planetary surfaces, while destroyer squadrons provided screening for the larger vessels. Fleet Admiral Suman observed the approaching armada from Earth's orbital command center, while her staff provided tactical updates on enemy strength and deployment. The Coalition had brought an impressive force, but they were still thinking in terms of conventional galactic warfare. They had no idea what humanity was about to unleash upon them. Admiral, the enemy fleet has assumed standard battle formation at the edge of our system. They appear to be preparing for a traditional siege engagement with overwhelming firepower concentrated against our orbital defenses. Admiral Suman studied the tactical display that showed Coalition ships arranging themselves for maximum destructive effect. Their formation was textbook perfect for conventional space warfare, but it had several critical weaknesses that human planners had identified during months of preparation. Signal all fleet commanders to begin final deployment phase. It is time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's home. Admiral Kethvar opened a communication channel to Earth, expecting to receive humanity's surrender after they saw the overwhelming force arrayed against them. His reptilian features showed the confidence of a predator that had cornered its prey, while his crew prepared weapon systems for the complete destruction of human civilization. Humans of Earth, you now face the full might of the Galactic Coalition. 2,000 ships carry enough firepower to turn your world into cosmic dust. Surrender immediately, and some of your species may survive as slaves in Coalition space. Continue to resist, and we will erase every trace of your existence from the galaxy. The response came not from Captain Hyunwoo or any other human commander, but from space itself, as reality seemed to shimmer around the Coalition fleet. Sensor screens throughout the enemy armada suddenly filled with new contacts appearing from locations that had been empty moments before. Captain Seokjin's second battle fleet decloaked from positions hidden in Earth's asteroid belt, while their weapons immediately targeted Coalition command ships. The human vessels had been waiting in perfect silence for weeks while using stealth technology that made them invisible to enemy sensors. Now they revealed themselves with devastating volleys that crippled 3 Coalition dreadnoughts before the enemy could react. Captain Taehyun's electronic warfare fleet emerged from concealment near Jupiter and immediately began jamming Coalition communication systems. Enemy ships found their targeting computers failing while their coordination broke down under waves of electronic interference. The perfect formation that Admiral Kethvar had arranged dissolved into chaos as ship commanders lost contact with their central command. From the outer system, Captain Yuna's heavy bombardment fleet opened fire with weapons that made space itself seem to bend around their projectiles. The massive kinetic rounds crossed millions of kilometers in seconds and struck coalition capital ships with force that shattered their hulls like glass. Each shot was precisely aimed to destroy critical systems while avoiding areas that might contain escape pods. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as his perfect battle formation came apart under attack from directions his sensors claimed were empty. Human ships appeared everywhere around his fleet, while their weapons demonstrated destructive power that exceeded every theoretical limit known to coalition science. All ships return fire immediately. Concentrate on the nearest human vessels, and destroy them before they can coordinate their attack. The coalition fleet tried to respond, but found their efforts hampered by electronic warfare that blinded their sensors and disrupted their targeting systems. Ships that attempted to fire often hit empty space, while human vessels seemed to dance between their weapons with impossible agility. Captain Jehun's carrier fleet launched wave after wave of automated fighters that swarmed coalition formations, like angry insects. The small craft moved with coordination that seemed impossible without biological pilots, but their attacks were perfectly synchronized to exploit weaknesses in enemy defenses. Coalition point defense systems found themselves overwhelmed by sheer numbers, while human fighters struck at critical targets with surgical precision. Captain Mingyu's fast attack squadron demonstrated why human military planners had spent decades studying coalition tactics. His ships moved through the enemy formation like sharks among smaller fish, while their weapons targeted exactly the right systems to cause maximum disruption. Coalition vessels found their engines failing and their weapons offline as human forces systematically dismantled their ability to fight. The space around Earth became a three-dimensional battlefield as 11 human fleets executed maneuvers that had been planned and practiced for generations. Each commander knew exactly what their role would be in the massive engagement, while their crews performed with efficiency that came from years of intensive training. Captain Hana's siege warfare fleet targeted coalition support vessels that carried ammunition and fuel for the main battle line. Her ships used precision weapons to create secondary explosions that spread throughout enemy formations while avoiding damage to the coalition crews, who were often enslaved soldiers from conquered worlds. Captain Jaewon commanded the defensive fleet that protected Earth's orbital installations while his weapons reached out to strike enemy vessels millions of kilometers away. His ships demonstrated human defensive technology that could intercept incoming projectiles traveling at near light speed while simultaneously engaging multiple targets with perfect accuracy. Captain Soyeon's deep strike fleet had been positioned beyond the edge of the Sol system and now attacked the coalition formation from behind. Her vessels appeared without warning among enemy support ships, while their weapons created havoc in areas the coalition had considered completely secure. Admiral Kethvar realized his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move before he made it. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, while their weapons found targets with accuracy that defied all probability. The coalition advantage in numbers meant nothing when the enemy could coordinate attacks from 11 directions simultaneously. Emergency. Signal to all coalition forces. We are facing military capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude. Request immediate reinforcement from Home Fleet reserves. Commander Ji-won looked up from her sensor station, with despair in her eyes. Sir, our communication systems are being jammed by enemy electronic warfare. We cannot contact Coalition Command or coordinate with our own ships effectively. The battle continued with human forces demonstrating tactical superiority that stunned. Coalition observers. Captain Kyung-min's reconnaissance fleet provided real-time intelligence that allowed other human commanders to exploit enemy weaknesses before the coalition could adapt their strategies. Captain Yunji's Special Operations. Fleet used experimental weapons that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Her ships fired projectiles that curved through space to strike targets behind cover, while their defensive systems created energy fields that absorbed enemy fire and converted it into additional power for their own weapons. Captain Dongwu's Stealth. Fleet continued its ghost-like attacks throughout the engagement, while coalition forces found themselves firing at shadows and empty space. His vessels would appear long enough to destroy enemy ships, then vanish before return fire could reach their positions. The coordination between human fleets reached levels that seemed impossible without direct neural linking between commanders. When one fleet engaged enemy forces, others would immediately move to support them with precisely timed attacks that maximized damage while minimizing human casualties. Captain Hyunwoo led the First Fleet in a direct assault on Admiral Kethvar's command ship while demonstrating why humanity had chosen him to represent their species during first contact. His tactical brilliance combined with superior human technology created a combination that coalition forces could not counter. The Galactic Dominion shook under repeated hits from human weapons, while its own return fire seemed to have no effect on enemy vessels. Admiral Kethvar watched his flagship systems fail one by one, while human ships pressed their attack with relentless efficiency. "Sir, we have lost main engines and primary weapon systems. Hull integrity is failing in multiple sections, and we cannot maintain defensive shields much longer." The Admiral looked at the tactical display that showed the complete destruction of his Grand Armada. Less than 200 coalition ships remained operational from the original force of over 2,000. The silence that followed the destruction of the coalition Grand Armada spoke louder than any victory broadcast across the galaxy. When coalition scout ships finally arrived at Sol System 3 weeks later, they found debris fields that stretched across entire orbital paths around Earth's star. The remains of over 2,000 warships drifted in space like monuments to the end of an era. High Counselor Thexmore received the scout reports in his private chambers while trying to comprehend how the greatest military force in galactic history had been completely annihilated. The humans had not simply won a battle, they had demonstrated capabilities that made coalition resistance appear hopeless. Every strategic assumption that had guided galactic politics for 3,000 years was now meaningless across coalition. Space member species began making decisions that would reshape the political landscape forever. The insectoid Karathi withdrew their fleets from coalition command and declared complete neutrality in what they now called the Human War. Their queen issued a statement that sent shockwaves through allied governments. The Karathi swarm will no longer provide military support for coalition expansion activities. We have observed human combat capabilities and determined that continued resistance would result in the extinction of our species. Similar declarations came from other coalition members as the impossible news spread through official channels. The aquatic Nephti openly discussed rebellion, while their premier called for immediate negotiations with Earth. Even some Vorthak military commanders began questioning whether their civilization could survive a prolonged conflict with humanity. On Earth, President Soo-young announced the formation of the Terran Federation while extending membership offers to any species seeking freedom from coalition tyranny. The first to accept were refugee populations from worlds the coalition had destroyed as examples of their power. These survivors knew what human protection could mean for oppressed peoples throughout the galaxy. Captain Minho led humanity's first offensive operations beyond Sol System with surgical strikes against coalition supply lines and communication centers. His ships moved through enemy territory like ghosts, while their weapons demonstrated precision that left military targets in ruins without harming civilian populations. The human war machine that had been hidden for generations now emerged in full view as converted civilian facilities began producing warships at unprecedented rates. Admiral Suman coordinated the expansion from Earth, while new fleet commanders received ships and crews for humanity's growing navy. Captain Zhonghan took command of the 4th Expansion Fleet that would establish human presence in systems abandoned by retreating coalition forces. His ships carried not just weapons, but also humanitarian supplies for species that had suffered under coalition rule for centuries. Captain Mi Young commanded the 5th Deep Strike Fleet, tasked with eliminating coalition strongholds in strategic locations throughout their territory. Her vessels used human stealth technology to appear without warning at enemy installations, while their weapons systematically dismantled coalition military infrastructure. The psychological impact of human victories spread faster than their actual. Military advances as species throughout the galaxy realized that coalition domination was no longer inevitable. Resistance movements that had been crushed for generations began to emerge from hiding, while coalition garrison forces found themselves facing uprisings on dozens of worlds. Captain Sung Hoon led the 6th Liberation Fleet in operations designed to free enslaved populations from coalition labor camps and military installations. His ships would arrive at enemy facilities with overwhelming force, while human marines secured prisoners and provided medical aid to beings who had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again. Captain Yeji commanded the 7th Reconnaissance Fleet. That mapped coalition territory while identifying targets for future operations. Her vessels used advanced sensors to locate hidden enemy bases and supply depots while remaining undetected by coalition security networks. Coalition intelligence services tried desperately to understand how humanity had achieved such overwhelming military superiority in apparent secrecy. Commander Nara led teams of analysts who studied captured human equipment while searching for weaknesses that coalition forces might exploit. What they discovered was even more disturbing than the battlefield reports suggested. Human technology was not just superior, it was based on scientific principles that coalition researchers had never encountered. Their weapon systems used exotic physics, while their defensive technologies seemed to manipulate space itself. High Counselor, the humans appear to have achieved breakthrough discoveries in multiple fields of science that we have not yet mastered. Their advantage is not simply numerical or tactical, but represents a fundamental technological superiority that may be impossible to overcome. High Counselor Thexmore studied the analysis reports while trying to find some path to coalition survival. The human military continued to expand its operations, while more species declared independence from coalition authority. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was collapsing under pressure from a single world that had been dismissed as primitive just months before. On distant worlds, coalition governors found themselves abandoned by their own forces as military units either retreated to defend core systems or surrendered to approaching human fleets. Some colonies declared independence while others requested human protection from coalition retaliation. Admiral Kethvar had survived the destruction of 2 coalition fleets and now found himself assigned to a desperate diplomatic mission that might represent his civilization's last hope for survival. His ship approached Sol system under a flag of truce while carrying surrender terms that would have been unthinkable just 1 year earlier. Fleet Admiral Suman received the coalition delegation in Earth's orbital conference center, while human fleet commanders observed the proceedings. The same room where Captain Minho had first met coalition representatives now hosted negotiations that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Admiral Kethvar stood before the human military leadership with scars from their previous encounters marking his scaled hide. His pride as a warrior was broken, but his intelligence as a strategist recognized that further resistance would only result in more coalition deaths without changing the inevitable outcome. Fleet Admiral Suman, the Coalition High Command has authorized me to discuss terms for ending hostilities between our peoples. We acknowledge that human military capabilities exceed our ability to resist and request negotiations for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Admiral Suman studied the defeated coalition officer with eyes that showed both victory and compassion. Humanity had won the war, but they took no pleasure in the suffering their victory had caused among enslaved species who had been forced to fight for their oppressors. Admiral Kethvar humanity will consider coalition surrender proposals, but our terms are not negotiable. All enslaved species must be granted immediate freedom, while coalition military forces will be reduced to levels necessary only for internal security. The negotiations continued for days, while reports arrived of coalition collapse throughout their territory. Member species continued to declare independence, while human fleets secured strategic locations across multiple sectors of space. The political map of the galaxy was being redrawn as coalition authority evaporated. Captain Dongwu provided intelligence updates on coalition military dispositions, while human forces consolidated their control over liberated systems. His reconnaissance ships reported that remaining coalition fleets were retreating to their core worlds while abandoning outer territories that had been conquered centuries earlier. President Su-Yung addressed the galaxy through communication networks that now carried human signals to every inhabited system. Her message offered hope to oppressed peoples while warning remaining coalition forces that resistance would only prolong their suffering. To all species throughout the galaxy, humanity extends our friendship and protection to those who seek freedom from tyranny. We did not choose this war, but we will finish it completely. The age of coalition domination is over, and a new era of galactic cooperation has begun. The final terms of coalition surrender were signed in Earth's orbital capital, while representatives from dozens of newly liberated species observed the ceremony. Admiral Kethvar placed his signature on documents that formally ended 3,000 years of galactic empire while acknowledging humanity as the dominant military power among the stars. Fleet Admiral Suman accepted the surrender with dignity, while announcing that human expansion would continue until every enslaved population had been freed. The Terran Federation would grow not through conquest, but through voluntary membership. As species chose human protection over coalition oppression, long-range sensors detected new human construction projects in star systems throughout former coalition territory as humanity began building the infrastructure necessary to govern a galactic civilization. Shipyards that would produce vessels for exploration and defense were being established, while diplomatic missions contacted species that had never known freedom. The story of one human fleet that had terrified the galaxy was ending, but the legend of 11 fleets that had reshaped galactic civilization was just beginning.